Right now, there's 80 Aboriginal missing and murdered women that have that have not that have not there's been no charges laid or nobody has been brought to trial in probably 98% of those particular cases. So I talk about killing fields. There's bodies laying, there's bodies all over this country um, that of primarily women, but not exclusively women, of Indigenous people, and I think that there's a part in our psyche, in our psychological composition that has been that is the that has developed because of colonized thinking that that we're disposable. We're not at we have not achieved yet the level. And this is not just for the Pictons and the Crawfords, but again, it's just the Canadians are generally so silent about these things. Nobody. And not only are they silent, but if you go into the Free Press, I don't know if you guys ever read the Free Press, but I do. Um, Not because I particularly think that everything that they say is accurate. It's just interesting to know what these folks are thinking about. Um, but if you go into, so if there's a story, Geraldine Beardy, for an example, um, you go into the letters to the editor and the comments and the electronic comments. Some of them are so horrific. I mean, their racism is so extreme that they can't even print them and the rest of them are just filled with like low level forms of ignorance and racism. And they don't even see that as racism though. That's because it's normal. So racism is normal towards Aboriginal people. It's normalized in 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 what we now call Canada. And so these are all like kind of manifestations of so you might think, oh, Picton's like some pig farmer out in BC, like kind of like not a not not he's a psychopath, or Crawford might be considered a psychopath. Uh, but we also know that in the case of Pamela George in Regina, these two university students, the son of one of the professors, celebrated their final exam by going out and hunting for Aboriginal women, and picked up and murdered and raped Pamela George. And so that we're not talking about the they're not all the Pictons. They're you know what I mean. So some Canadians kind of think, well, they're just the extreme kind of like psychos, eh? But there's patterns that are we know that because we've tracked that, eh? If you go into the north, that are there's what they're called Johns. I don't think they're predators really. That leave their fancy homes and jump in their fancy cars. Some of them with their car seats in the back of their cars. Go looking for young Aboriginal girls in the North End. That's happening right now. I mean, you can go down on Parr Street, on King, on in the West End. That people are coming. These are because our Aboriginal women are commodities. They think, I guess, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not trying to say I think what a John thinks or a predator thinks, but I think that they believe that there's a level of dehumanization that has occurred, that is a part of the colonial psychology as it relates to Indigenous people. Um, that that is. I mean, I don't care what people call words in terms of occupy, or we know we're occupied. You guys gotta start knowing that this is occupied. It's already occupied, and it's occupied by a mentality that persists, of racial superiority, uh, that cultural superiority, Um, certainly, I mean, in terms of there's no denying that there's economic superiority at this time and at this stage of capitalism. Um, but um, but that's what we need to decolonize, eh? I mean, we need if we are going to move into any kind of a different Canada or a different world even, is that it's us that we need to decolonize. We need to decolonize ourselves. So everybody has to. If we understand what the colonial project was all about, how it's impacted on Indigenous populations. I mean, I just gave you a couple examples, but I mean, you can't live in this country without knowing intimately, how colonization has impacted. Know the psychological, I think, traumas that has caused Western people or settler populations and their descendants, and try to begin a process of recovering your humanity, basically. And I think that's possible. I mean, I think that people can decolonize, and it's a huge project. It is. I mean, the levels of oppression that exists on Indigenous peoples is intense. I mean, from a policy level, from a political level, at every possible level. And right now, we're we I think that, first of all, it started where people just wanted to fucking remove us from the face of the earth. That was done. I mean, there was. We know, and revisionist historians have said that there was between 90, and I've even heard up to 500 million people that populated this continent at the time of conquest, at the time of European conquest, and within the first 30 years, 90% had vanished. And that was by a variety of reasons. Some of it was by murder and war, and some of it was through disease. Some of it was through we know of populations in the south where, after living with Europeans for a little while, they knew that they weren't going to leave, and so they committed mass suicide because they knew it was better to die than to live with Europeans. That's there's historical evidence that supports that, and I mean, Europeans have been at war with Indigenous people since that time of conquest, and I believe that it's had different levels of intensity, but it's never stopped. And one of the ways is keeping people in that level of ignorance that that seems to be fairly prevalent in Canada about Indigenous people. My friend Priscilla Satie would call you all the new Indians, eh? Because because there's the capitalist economies will always have people who are dispossessed, and and I think that's partly what the Occupy movement has been about, because in the United States and in Canada, there's always been a certain part of the population that have been, that are superfluous to capitalism. They just don't. They're not a part of that system. And there's greater and greater numbers as numbers who are superfluous to capitalism, and that group is going to experience, is going to feel some of the, at least in the economic sense, the what it feels like to be, marginalized and outside of a system, not able to benefit from parts of the economy, and so people losing their houses, losing their jobs, not having opportunities. That's something that we've had and continue to have as it's normal. That's the way it's been, and so people are experiencing in some ways what we went from 100% full employment to in some of our communities to 90% employment in less than a generation. Now we had a different economic way, but it was still employment. I mean, we still met our social needs by a form of economy, and so we know what it's like. We've been living that for some time. And the other thing I want to talk about is another way of after trying to remove us from the earth, and we know that ideologies of what's been referred to as kind of the terra nullius, say, you guys hear about that, the empty earth kind of policy, that if lands that were not occupied by Christians, they were empty, they were declared empty lands. And so that was one of the European concepts, as well as the concept of manifest destiny, that God sent them here on this mission to colonize our lands and our territories. But those ideologies are still kind of intact, and they just kind of take different forms. And one of the forms I think has really been very problematic for me is the ideology of there's been a long-term attempt to assimilate Indigenous people into becoming white people. I mean, that's been the whole objective of the colonial project, and it still hasn't. It really hasn't changed much, because we are different. We have different value base and a different worldview and a different paradigm. That's not attuned to a capitalist economy. Like we would oppose in a traditional way the devastation of the earth to make computers, for example, or we would, from a cultural paradigm. I'm not to say that computers are not. But would we destroy our earth for that? Would we destroy our mother for that? Would we poison the rivers and destroy the lakes and cut the forest down and do what's been done in the name of civilization and progress at the expense of life on Earth? I mean, after that, what then? What then? There's an end. There's a finite end of resources on our Earth, and we've not behaved in a sustainable way with respect to those resources. So then what? We need to, and I think those questions are starting to be asked by people who are not Indigenous people and living in, and there are some Indigenous people now that are totally assimilated. They want to go and pollute the